times that I've seen you lose your way. You're not in control, and you won't be told. All I can do to keep you safe is hold you close till you can breathe on your own. Till you can breathe on your own. Hold tight, you're slowly coming back to life. I've been giving you hell, I've been giving you hell, darling. Let go of all your haunted dreams tonight. I've been giving you hell, I've been giving you hell, darling. Hold tight, you're slowly coming back to life. I've been giving you hell, I've been giving you hell, darling. Let go of all your haunted dreams tonight. I've been giving you hell, I've been giving you hell. I won't let you down. Everyone keeps a darker place to lose control. You're not alone. And when you come looking for embrace, I know your soul. I'll be your home till you can breathe on your own. Till you can breathe on your own. Hold tight, you're slowly coming back to life. I've been giving you hell, I've been giving you hell, darling. Let go of all your haunted dreams tonight. I've been giving you hell, I've been giving you hell, darling. Hold tight, you're slowly coming back to life. I've been giving you hell, I've been giving you hell, darling. Let go of all your haunted dreams tonight. I've been giving you hell, I've been giving you hell, and I won't let you down. You never think that you can fly. You'll always swim against the tide. Don't you know your pain is mine? And I would die 1,000 times to ease your mind. To ease your mind. Hold tight, you're slowly coming back to life. I've been giving you hell, I've been giving you hell, darling. Let go of all your haunted dreams tonight. I've been giving you hell, I've been giving you hell, darling. Hold tight, you're slowly coming back to life. I've been giving you hell, I've been giving you hell, darling. Let go of all your haunted dreams tonight.
This session will begin shortly. Please take your seats.
And I won't let you down.
I don't know what you've been told, but time is running out. No need to take it slow. I'm stepping to you toe to toe. I should be scared, honey, maybe so, but I ain't worried about it right now. Keeping dreams alive, 1999 heroes. I ain't worried about it right now. Swimming in the floods, dancing on the clouds below. I ain't worried about it.
Please welcome to the stage Tolullah Oni from UrbanBetter and University of Cambridge.
Good afternoon, everyone. Great. I really like to feel the audience in the room. I'm Tolullah. I'm a professor at the University of Cambridge, and I'm founder and CEO of UrbanBetter, as a social enterprise with a mission to accelerate healthy, sustainable urban development. Now, that would be the usual tagline, but if you were to ask the question differently and ask me what it was that informs my vision of tomorrow's cities, I would say three things: a physician, a runner, and an urbanite. Why? One, physician. I'm a public health physician, but my patients are cities. So I work on health outside of healthcare. But I also think cities are medicine, right? And I think that the urban places and spaces that we inhabit can be the prescription that helps protect our health and in climate resilient ways. Second, I'm a runner. And that experience gives me an understanding of the importance of access to physical activity enabling environment as medicine for my physical and mental health, but also the inequalities in access to this medicine in cities globally. And critically, the power of lived experience informed advocacy to drive greater action, greater accountability, and greater demand for healthy climate resilient cities. And thirdly, because I'm an urbanite. So I was born in Lagos, and I'm a proud Londoner. And really, this experience has really underscored the importance of adopting a complex systems approach, really getting everyone working together to create healthy, sustainable cities. But also given the pace of urbanization that we're seeing worldwide, the importance that tomorrow's cities are well-being focused and intergenerationally fair. So how can we ensure cities have health and climate resilience at the center of how we're thinking about urban design, urban planning, urban infrastructure development? And secondly, that tomorrow's cities are people-centered and privilege participation of citizens in decisions that shape the future of cities. And at my organization, UrbanBetter, we actually talk about precision advocacy. So how can we equip, connect a youth-led, community-led, Africa-led global movement using citizen science and physical activity, right? What we actually want people to do to advocate for healthier, resilient places, but greater participation in how we do this. So this work is urgent, right? And nowhere is this more urgent than in cities worldwide, because we're seeing this growth of cities and rising climate vulnerability. And so the focus of this session today is one that really excites me. Not only are we focusing on tomorrow's cities, which, by the way, are actually being built today. So tomorrow is very important that we recognize that. But we're also focusing on what works. And so it's a real pleasure to moderate this session that's focused on looking at what works in leveraging the power of nature, leveraging the power of technology as active ingredients in the medicine that shapes people's health and planetary health. So with that, I would like to kick us off, and as someone coming from London, it really is a privilege to welcome Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, to give us the keynote speech.
Well, thank you, Tolullah. It's a pleasure to be here back at CGI and to be introduced by a fellow Londoner. You know, more than half the world's population call a city their home. By 2050, it will be 70%. It's a phenomenon which can be traced back to the Industrial Revolution, when the advent of new technology meant we could draw resources from the earth to advance our economy and society. In time, we came to learn the process was degrading everything which sustains us. But the combustion engine, the coal-fired power station, or any technology for that matter, is neither inherently good or bad. It is we, its creators and users, who are responsible for its application. And while continued use of the technology of a previous age remains the cause of our current crisis, in London, the technology of the future offers a route, in my view, to our salvation. Politics is often about taking small steps. But in recent years, we've taken a gigantic leap in cleaning London's air, with much of our headway owed to tech, including the world's largest clean air zone, the biggest zero-emission bus fleet in Western Europe, and a network of air quality sensors providing real-time pollution data. When I was first elected the Mayor of London in 2016, I was told by world-leading experts it would take 193 years to bring the quality of London's air within legal limits. Now, with bold policies and the aid of tech, we're on course to get there by next year, 184 years earlier than projected. We're also using technology, including solar panels, to help schools harness the elements so they can use more of their resources, enriching the lives of young Londoners. We're deploying AI to detect damp and mould to improve the condition of public housing. Our transport team, using travel data and in consultation with Londoners, we've worked with Google Maps to modify their algorithms so cyclists can now make their journeys on less busy streets or on dedicated cycle lanes. Like any good idea, it's been shared and spread freely across the globe, and now over 60 million safer, healthier journeys are taking place every month. An exemplar of how government and big tech can collaborate for the greater good. From air to education, housing to transport, technology has been the mainspring of progress in London over the last 8 years. Sometimes in life, however, the old ideas are the best, and there's simply no better teacher than nature. Yet, let's be frank, rather than learn from the natural world, we've exercised reckless dominion over it. This morning, though, I witnessed New York's remarkable effort to rebalance its relationship with nature through the Billion Oyster Project. In that same spirit of environmental revival in London, and after a 400-year absence, we brought beavers back. We named the first two, Justin Beaver and Sigourney Beaver, yes, really. And they didn't waste any time getting to work reducing flooding and increasing biodiversity. And by the way, they've also been keeping busy outside of work because we've recently welcomed a new generation of beavers, or as I call them, super engineers. And yes, Justin and Sigourney are very proud parents. In London, through our rewilding programme, by winning National Park City status and planting over 500,000 trees, we're demonstrating that nature need not be remote, but can be central to city life. The next great task we've set ourselves is to clean up our waterways. London relies on a sewer system built in the 19th century for a population less than half our current size, meaning millions of tons of untreated raw sewage spills into the River Thames each year. Relief is on the way in the form of our new multi-billion-dollar super sewer, 7.2 meters in diameter and 15 miles long. But we know that we can't concrete our way to sustainability. Our ultimate success relies on partnership, yes, with the private sector, charities and communities, but also with the living world. So we'll also introduce reed beds, wildlife and trees, proving again that technology and nature are no longer adversaries in competition, but allies in concert. Let me end by acknowledging that this is not, unfortunately, a moment for irrepressible optimism. Victory is unsure, but the stage, in my view, is set. Cities are where our fates will be determined. What we've done and hope to do in London, what you'll hear from others now, offers a glimpse of the future we can earn. If we act with ambition and urgency, combine the best of the old and the new, we can make our planet a cleaner, greener, healthier home for this generation to enjoy and the next to inherit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Khan, for really highlighting 3 things I want to tease out there. That gigantic leaps are possible. You know, we talk about the need for transformative action, but often we limit ourselves in the imagination of what is possible. And I think the work that's happening in London is a great example of that, of clean air action as an example of the application of tech to shape tomorrow's cities. And that highlight on the importance of focusing on that future generation to make sure that, you know, keeping us grounded on the importance of the work at hand. Without further ado, it's a pleasure to welcome, we have 2 commitment makers that we will hear from before we get onto the panels. So first, please join me in welcoming CGI commitment maker Rashima Ingram with the Bahamas Mangrove Alliance.
Island cities like Freeport and Nassau in the Bahamas share common challenges with metropolitan coastal cities, especially when it comes to resilience and climate disaster recovery. Mangroves and wetlands are critical to this urban resilience. In 2019, Hurricane Dorian struck 2 of the most populated and economically important islands of the Bahamas, causing massive damage. Coastal communities lost homes and the natural defenses that had protected them for generations, the mangroves. In response, we took bold action for our environment, for our economies, for our people and our future. The Bahamas Mangrove Alliance launched the Planting 1 Million Mangroves in the Bahamas Commitment to Action, pledging to restore what was lost. One of the first plantings after Dorian took place at the dawn of the North Shore in Grand Bahama, where over 100 local fishers, youth, volunteers, and civic organizations came together. We were planting resilience, not just trees, restoring ecosystems, strengthening the economy, and securing the future of our communities. Through the BMA, the Bahamas Mangrove Alliance, we have mobilized community organizations, scientific experts, schools, and all of our peers, family, and friends. Our approach is to diversify, inclusive, and sustainable methods. And we're grateful for our partners, including Bonefish and Tarpon Trust, Waterkeepers Bahamas, the Perry Institution, and many others. And to date, nearly 200,000 mangroves have been planted. And we are just getting started. Our work is measured by the lives we touch and the landscapes we heal, restored habitats, enhanced fisheries, and more resilient coastlines. The Clinton Global Initiative has amplified our vision, helping us to connect with a global network of partners. In May, CGI hosted an event in the Bahamas and brought together partners, including our coral friends. And together we learned about the climate resilience in the Caribbean and the role women play in responding to climate crisis. They joined us for a mangrove planting to learn about this critical work and to see action. Through CGI, Bonefish and Tarpon Trust, and the Caribbean Philanthropy Alliance, we are already engaging in regional efforts to expand ecosystem restoration. With CGI's support, we are accelerating solutions that empower communities, restore nature, and build resilience. Thank you for standing with us as we rebuild the Bahamas, 1 mangrove at a time.
so much, Rashima. I love that connection between the habitat and health and livelihood and planting resilience and not just trees. I love everything about that statement. So thank you for that. Now, please join me in welcoming to the stage a second commitment maker, Carwyn Davies from Herzl Development.
Thank you and good afternoon. Okay. It's a biophilic living is the name of the project, and it's been delivered in Swansea, which is in South Wales in the UK. I'm going to tell the story through a typical human experience because I think it illustrates what we're seeking to achieve better than anything. A building is nothing more without the people that occupy it. So rather than bore you with the innumerable technicalities of our Clinton Global Initiative commitment, I'm going to just basically tell you what I've called Keith's story. Keith sits alone in his apartment. His wife passed away 18 months ago. Keith has no family, and his friendship group is steadily shrinking. His mobility has affected how far he can walk, and has therefore limited his interaction with people. Swansea, the vibrant town he grew up in as a child, is now in a shadow of decline. Keith gets lonely. He's also a quiet and reserved man who has always found it difficult to socialise. However, since he arrived at the Biophilic project, his life has improved immeasurably. He now uses his interest in growing plants to meet his neighbours, where he works as part of a community facility that sells food from the rooftop gardens and glass houses. He even gets involved in guided tours of the project, meeting all levels of society. His visits to the doctor have reduced. He feels for the first time in 18 months, that he's a part of something. His well-being has improved. He has also learnt about climate change and how we can all lead better lives for us and the planet. He tends to his vegetables in summer on the roof gardens, and in winter he will shelter in the glasshouse and grow a different variety of edible plant by using a nutrient-filled water system, a skill he never thought he could learn at his age. He is often asked to tend to operational issues. His former profession as a heating engineer always comes in handy. His heating bills are low, and it pleases him that the energy is derived from a highly innovative low-carbon energy system, and that he lives in one of the UK's most innovative projects, a part new build and a part refurbishment. Life without his wife of 50 years will always sadden him, but he knows that she would approve to see him living his life in a positive way. Biophilic living is more than a building. It's a community where, through a sustainable, nature-based approach, the lives of both people and planet are improved. We want to make this sort of living the new norm, acquiring buildings and using them to regenerate cities and towns, creating a new way of living for societies. And we want to partner with the CGI community to do this. Thank you very much.
So we hear it say that over 80% of factors that influence our health lie outside of healthcare, and they lie in the environments where we live, where we work, where we play, where we socialize. So I love that commitment to helping us reconceptualize how we live in ways that are in balance with nature. So we're going to go on to the panel discussion now. We're going to have two panels. The first will be really focused on nature, and the second on technology. Or is it the other way around? We'll find out. So please join me first in welcoming to the stage Nigel Sullivan, Chief Sustainability and People Officer of Bupa, Hakim Jeffrey, Senior Coordinator at Green City Force, Brenda Torres, Executive Director at Estuario, San Juan Bay Estuario Partnership. Please join me in welcoming them. Okay, yes, I was right. This is a nature one. So, at ease. All right, we're going to launch straight into it. Nigel, I'm going to come to you first, actually. So, Bupa is a British multinational health insurance and healthcare company, but operating worldwide. But you are the Chief Sustainability Officer. So can you tell us a little bit about what a healthcare company, why you need a sustainability program, and how your work on climate and sustainability in cities?
Thanks, Tolullah. Well, I mean, we're in the business of healthcare, and unless we have a healthy planet, we'll not have healthy customers. So that's the fundamental. I mean, I think for us, we have a purpose as an organization, which is to help people live longer, healthier and happier lives and make a better world. That's what we stand for. We've been doing it for 75 years. And for us, we feel very, very strongly that to have a healthy planet and have healthy citizens in it is the best way forward. To do this, we've set up three missions. One is called Mission Zero, which is very much us taking responsibility for our own impact on the planet, particularly around emissions and carbon in particular. Another one is Mission Accelerate, which is about advocacy and partnership and engagement. And then the third is around regeneration. It's really not enough anymore to do less harm. We've got to do good in a positive way. So we take those responsibilities very seriously. And we're very committed to what we call Healthy Cities, which is a program that we launched. We started a few years ago in Spain, but we're launching on a much bigger scale at the moment. Tolullah.
Great, thank you. And maybe just zeroing in a little bit on one aspect of that. Can you tell us a little bit more about, you mentioned it a little bit there, the urban nature regeneration aspect of that initiative. So can you just tell us a little bit more about that, and particularly how you're working with local communities in shaping this, and maybe what anyone else in the room can do to collaborate?
Yeah, sure. So what Healthy Cities is, it started in Spain a few years ago. And what it is, basically, there's a challenge, a physical challenge, really, usually over a month. There's an app. That app's connected to the phone or wearables. And we try and engage people in that challenge. And it can be quite competitive. There's leaderboards and et cetera. It tends to be around steps taken. And it runs usually for a month. It's running in Australia just at the moment. A lot of competition across the company as well as in that. Last year, we had 80,000 people involved in it, 10 billion steps, and we put approximately £2 million into regeneration projects as a result of that. So the idea is you do the challenge, you get physically active, and then there's a reward in it as well in terms of that. What we're trying to get to next year is 1 million people involved in that, and that's reaching out not obviously beyond we employ a lot of people, but not 1 million. But that's really our employees and local communities would be the bulk of the people involved. And then, so this year we're aiming for 500,000. We think we're going to surpass that and surpass 10 billion steps taken. And obviously we'll invest in regeneration projects as well. To give you an example, you mentioned we're a funder, so a lot of corporates buy health insurance for their employees. In Spain this year, where we've been doing this longest, our launch event earlier this year, there were 260 corporates in the room, because very often corporate companies, they struggle to know what to do, as we all do, like, what can I do? And what we do, we provide this as a free service, and people engage in it, and we think, we want to create a movement and get more people moving and invest in those healthy cities.
Great, thank you. I do love a good pun. So the idea of a movement that is literally embedded in physical activity is one I have to double click on. So thank you for that. you know, in order to do this, we need environments that are conducive for this. So I really like your focus on getting people moving, but also the urban regeneration. Hakim, I'm going to come to you on that front, right? Because you work for the Green City Force, organization based here in New York that envisages a future where we live in green cities where everyone can thrive. Can you tell us a little bit about your work training teens and young adults from frontline communities to really take control and shape their communities in this way?
Oh, of course. Well, I can start exactly where everything has started overall. I'm originally from Bayview Houses, which is a very underserved community in Canarsie. And just to start with like the work, it's just a lot of things that happen within Bayview Houses. You know, we're surrounded by McDonald's, Dunkin' Donuts, a lot of unhealthy things that do not keep us taking care of our bodies. And especially being from that neighborhood, that's honestly what got me introduced into that work. I was about 18 years old, didn't have any job. I was eating a lot of fast food every day, and I wanted to start by doing something really great with my time at that age. And especially just going through the AmeriCorps program for about 10 months, I was able to get hired by the organization after that. And just starting my work at Green City First, I'm currently now managing our Equitable fellowship team, where we're pretty much training up our leaders to be continuing that work on educating our communities and residents on what it means to have a sustainable, healthy lifestyle that's going to take care of you, that's going to take care of your kids, that's going to take care of the communities that they're also from as well. And mostly, it's just really about just really ensuring that, you know, our core members have the education to educate our residents on a healthy lifestyle, creating those closed loop systems, and just ensuring that we have in those relationships that make things matter to ensure that we're taking care of ourselves as we're taking care of the communities and they're also taking care of us.
Well, thank you. I want to highlight for the benefit of people in the room, the Green City Force has built and cultivated 6 large-scale urban farms in New York City, public housing communities, and distributed over 176,000 pounds of fresh produce to residents, engaged over 1,000 young adults. I mean, come on, guys. I mean, you mentioned briefly there a closed loop system. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that and how you are, creating this and what this looks like, and how you are, using this to promote inclusion as well in the communities?
Oh, of course. That's really where it starts. I can speak from my experience as a core member and as a service coordinator from Bayview Houses, right? When it comes to just closed loop systems, it's really just about that interaction, that first interaction that you are making within the community and the residents that's coming by. If you're seeing somebody that you usually see every morning walking their dogs or just doing their regular morning grocery run trip, just saying hi, how you doing, what kind of veggies are you picking up at the supermarket, how do they look, And just starting that one small interaction can lead to many more interactions that is happening day in and day out. So to talk a little bit more about our work at Green City Forest, we have 6 large-scale farms across New York City, and we currently host farm stands every Saturday at our eco-hubs where residents are eligible to either volunteer their own time to receive produce, or they can bring food scraps that they're getting from our eco-hubs in order to receive produce. So in terms of them giving us volunteer time, more engagement time to learn a little bit more about our work, more about what we do, while we're also learning a little bit more about them, that's how we're creating those closed loop systems where they're bringing us our food scraps, they're bringing us our time, they're bringing us our engagement where we're able to really create those closed loop systems where the community is getting healthier, they're getting more educated, and we're also just creating a really close-knit relationship on what it means to take care of our communities.
Thank you so much, Hakim. I should say that I really appreciated you sharing your lived experience as the motivator and really the power of really channeling that lived experience into impact. So thank you for that, and really for highlighting the you know, the indirect, you know, you're doing things to increase access to healthy foods and healthy environments, but also how that can foster social cohesion. Brenda, nowhere is this more important than in areas where you're confronted with natural disasters. And we know there's evidence that when these things happen, communities that are better connected and have greater cohesion tend to fare better. So I'm going to use that as a segue to your initiative. So Estuario operates in Puerto Rico. So could you tell us a little bit about your work turning hard infrastructure into green infrastructure, and I believe you had a CGI commitment to action as well. So maybe can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. I have to say that Estuario has been transformed right after Hurricane Maria hit us in 2017. Our platform really became a platform to make accessible federal funding as well as information regarding data. You know, what's happening, what was happening. You know, the baseline of the condition before the hurricane and the conditions after. We're a nonprofit organization, but we are also a national estuary program, which is a program created under the Clean Water Act. And there are 28 estuary programs, and the one in Puerto Rico, in San Juan, Puerto Rico, is the only one outside of the continental U.S. and within tropical waters. What that means is that we're being observed, right? Because we could definitely, with this funding that we received on a yearly basis by the Congress, we could definitely be a great pilot and a great example for other islands to replicate ways for us to become more resilient and to really lead the process of recovery and just, you know, becoming a very sustainable region. We are within an urbanized region in San Juan, and I have to define that estuary is where fresh water from streams, rivers, creeks, even runoff mixes with the ocean. And that generates this an important ecosystem and also an ecosystem that acts as a buffer and supports, you know, and safeguards the safety of the community. So one thing that we're doing is making sure that the responsibles for the water infrastructure, as well as the responsible for the conservation of the ecosystems, are working together, and they're also following the new guidelines on how to become resilient, right? We don't want them just to invest in great infrastructure. We want them to invest in an infrastructure that is robust, that considers, you know, the climate impacts or the projections, and one that it really incorporates the solutions based on the natural resources that we have around. So it's really, it's difficult to do so because we are in a hurry, right? Like an urgency kind of path that we're trying to reconstruct what was destroyed. But at the same time, that's the purpose of our organization, is to just be right in the middle of it and just guide the process and bring those partners together in order for them to work efficiently. Our commitment to action is to reverse a channelization that was done back in the 1950s, and that has a channelization of an urban creek. And if you see this urban creek right in the middle of the estuarine system, it has collapsed, like all the concrete walls has collapsed, as well as the sanitary sewer system is not really working. So what's really flowing is raw sewage directly into our lagoons and the water bodies around. This is also pose an impact, negative impact to the communities living there. We have around 36,000 people that really are in contact with this, you know, this raw sewage, and really impacts their health.
Yeah. I was really interested to hear that you, given the extent of work you do, the importance of engaging with communities. Can you tell us a little bit about your citizen science approach? Because you know, in earlier prep, how you are using that to foster community engagement, building on Hakim's point.
Yes, so one thing that I observed right after Hurricane Maria hit us is that we brought a lot of scientists from the United States to come to the island to raise data on what was the impact. And I noticed that we could definitely send or teach our citizens to become citizen scientists and really transfer that technical knowledge for them to be the ones actually getting the data right after. So we put together a certification called the Citizen Science for Coastal Resilience, and we teach them how to do restoration work as well as, you know, getting data on how the mangroves are doing, the seagrasses, coral reefs, all that seascapes, the health of that seascape, so we can have information before, and as we know, we're going to continue to have those impacts, so continue to have the information from the citizens. So that's one of the citizen scientist projects we have.
Amazing. I just, yeah, come on. That's amazing. I'm going to go around just to close off this panel, give you each of the panelists a chance to, because, you know, when I started the session, I reflected a little bit on, you know, how I would, what 3 words I would use to describe myself that informs and shapes your vision for a future, the future of cities. So, and this could be a personal, sorry, I'm putting you on the spot here, but this could be personal, this could be professional, but I'm curious as to how you would describe three words that you would use to describe yourself and what motivates and drives your work here. Who'd like to go first? Go on.
I would definitely like to say passion, community, and resilience.
Fabulous, thank you.
I think from our point of view, leave no one behind.
Fantastic. I'll allow the extra, the hyphenation. And Brenda?
For me, it's equity. Compassion really drives me, and sustainability.
Thank you. And the second panel has that warning as coming. And I think the reason that is important is because, you know, we are human and we are social animals, and we are driven by our own experiences, and that informs and shapes how we feel and how we act in terms of our urgency. So I will invite you all to do that at the end as well, not to speak, but to reflect on that. But with that, join me in thanking the nature panel.
Thank you.
Okay, so for the next, we're going to hear from a panel that's focused on technology. So please join me in welcoming Davida Herzl, co-founder of Aclima, Mariana Matus, co-founder and CEO of Biobot Analytics, and Alfredo Brillembourg, founder of Urban Think Tank. Okay, great. So, I mean, we're separating nature and tech, but really, this it's a false separation. But we'll start with you. We'll start with Davida. Aclima pioneered a new way to map and analyze air pollution and greenhouse gases. This is something that I feel passionate about, so I'm really happy to start here. You're able to track this on a block-by-block basis. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that picks up nicely from the citizen engagement and the community involvement.
Absolutely. Maybe I'll start with like a little tidbit on our origin story. So I'm a lawyer by training, entrepreneur by DNA. And I was in my evidence class in law school, and climate change was getting a lot of attention at the time. And I remember thinking, wait a second, how can these emitters, how are they getting away with this? How is this legal? And so I started unpacking environmental policy in the United States. And what I learned is that the United States Clean Air Act, which passed in 1968 under President Nixon, is the most copied piece of legislation around, one of the most copied pieces of American legislation around the world. And what's novel about it, and interesting from a climate perspective, is that the standards that were passed for what levels of emissions were acceptable got tied to the state of measurement technology in 1968. Silicon Valley has evolved a lot. We all have little computers in our pockets, right? It's really fundamentally transformed. And yet here we are dealing with a civilizational crisis, and we can't measure, and we don't measure, the emissions that are threatening all of our collective future. I saw that, and I said, that's a problem worth solving. And when I was in law school, my parents weren't like, okay, what firm are you going to go practice at? The question around the dinner table was, what are you going to build? And so I decided that this needed to be built. And it's really freaking hard. I've been doing it for 14 years almost, incredibly difficult. Silicon Valley at the time was not open to these kinds of innovations. It was all social media, a lot of other innovations. And so what we decided was, let's invent a new way to measure these things and to measure them at the level of scientific quality that the regulatory community needs. And so we've done that, fast forward to now, and today we're the only company in the world that can do these kinds of measurements with what we call hyperlocal resolution and source attribution. So we can say not only what are these pollutants, but where are they coming from? And that's a big deal in our space and a fundamental kind of first principles issue for climate.
Thank you. I mean, it's one of those things where we show that we sometimes we anchor what we are doing now on things that are out of date, and actually we have to challenge those things, and we always need a lawyer to help us push that. You recently announced a statewide contract with California Air Resources Board. So can you maybe tell us why this is so important?
So the hardest customer in the world is the regulator, right? So the agencies that are responsible for protecting us, they have to meet an extremely high scientific standard because, like I said, this law was tied to methodologies that were, current in the 1960s, 1970s. And so they have to meet that standard. And since nobody had really innovated in this space, they had never really seen new technology, which is shocking. But we go to the EPA, we go to the DEC in New York, we go to CARB, and it's so novel that they needed to be kind of educated on how it works and the underlying science. And so the fact that CARB adopted us, it's actually the first deployment of its kind in the United States. The first one was actually here in New York that we did in 2022. But this one is massive. It's across 64 environmental justice communities. So because of the way that air pollution is measured, historically, Black and brown communities across the United States have been exposed to higher levels of pollution. And the measurements that are taken far away from those communities. And so you have a disproportionate sort of health disparity amongst Black and brown communities due to higher levels of pollution. So it's a big deal because it's one of the most important regulators in the world.
Right, and that speaks to equity, right?
Yes, fundamentally.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So measuring the data is one thing, but data is only as powerful as who it's in the hands of,
right,
and their ability to use that to drive action. So
right,
are you finding, can you tell us a little bit about how communities, businesses, outside
yes,
of the government, who's using this, and is that actually?
Yeah, and so our customers span all three: the government, businesses, emitters, and communities. We started with regulators because if they gave our data the stamp of approval, then communities, businesses would use it. And so that's what we found, that when the EPA, and so we do sit on a federal contract for the EPA, we sit on a major, had a major contract with the state of New York. We now have this contract in California, and a lot of expansion coming in the next few years. But when they adopt, it gives us the sort of blessing that this is scientifically valid data that can be used to understand local sources of emissions. So what a lot of people don't know about emitters in the United States under the Clean Air Act is that all of their emissions are primarily self-reported. And up until a few years ago, literally using pen and paper. And so this is a fundamental transformation that's necessary in the climate battle. So really, really critical.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to use that to pivot to Mariana, because when we're talking about, you're talking about one form of data and really trying to get acceptability around, using that form of data. I'm super fascinated, Mariana, about your work, going from air pollution to waste. And we heard from Mayor Khan around the importance of that kind of waste management. But Biobot Analytics is the first company in the world to commercialize data from sewage. And interestingly, using that for different types of health and societal threats, from COVID to the opioid crisis. So can you tell us how you ended up focusing on wastewater and sewage, and how the technology works?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really all started with, myself. I was born and raised in the outskirts of Mexico City, not a lot of services. Then through my education, I got to live in places like Cambridge in the UK and the Netherlands and now Boston. And I think at some point I was just asking myself the question as to how is it possible to have this level of inequality and disparity in services, and how is it possible that your zip code determines your health more than your genetic code? And I think it's part of it is because many of these communities are invisible to policymakers, invisible to regulators, invisible to resources. And the opportunity that we saw, I am a scientist by training and have become now an entrepreneur and founder. And the opportunity that we saw is that if we can tap into wastewater, we're tapping into a very special type of real-time data about human health and about human behavior. And maybe we don't think about it, but it's one of the most natural, organic activities that we all experience, going to the restroom. And what we don't know, or we don't think about, is when we're flushing away, we're basically contributing our biomarker data into a sewer system. So that's what we're doing. We're tapping into that data source to understand infectious disease outbreaks and activity, to understand drug use, and to fundamentally transform how public health is done and how healthcare is delivered. So how it works at the high level is we have a network of collection sites for wastewater samples all over the US. Those samples are sent to a laboratory, and in the lab, we're using molecular technologies like PCR, sequencing, mass spectrometry, technologies that you would usually use on like human swab samples or serum samples. We are applying it on our collective biome in order to map that disease activity and that drug consumption activity at the town and city level. And that is getting shared with the communities themselves, as well as the funders, which usually are more like state level, federal level agencies that are adopting this data as well.
Yes, and I think for a lot of people, the COVID pandemic was maybe the first time they heard about, using waste effluents to anticipate outbreaks. And so can you maybe talk a little bit about that interaction with city officials? How are they using the data?
Absolutely. I think what's really fascinating to me is that up until the COVID-19 pandemic, this type of technology and approach only was done for research purposes in academia. There was no company, no service being offered about it. And when we started, it was just so hard to get those local communities and elected officials to engage with it because they had never heard anything like this. And then the pandemic came. It was a little bit like, perfect moment to put the technology in the spotlight. And it's really considered one of the breakthrough technologies of the pandemic, is that now wastewater monitoring has been embraced by the US, by many countries around the world. To the comment from Davida, now that CDC, HHS, NIH, these big influencer agencies are using it, the demand at the local level just continues to grow and expand. And they know that it's scientifically accurate, that you can work with it to make a difference. So what we're seeing is mostly citizen engagement, communication with hospitals to give them an early warning 2 to 4 weeks in advance of an uptick in hospital cases, in admissions, as well as some changes in policy making, resource allocation, and evaluation of the effectiveness of programs that are getting deployed with those dollars.
That's really, really fascinating, and your response to this, so you can take the blame for what I'm about to say, your response to this has made me think that the final round, instead of thinking about 3 things that you used to describe yourself, I'd ask you to think about 3 ingredients that you think would be important in partnerships to leverage this technology. So I'm giving you a heads up, and it's Mariana's fault. So I'm going to use that pivot to Alfredo. And the reason I was thinking about this is partnerships, right? You need all sorts of different people using this, coming up with a technology using different sorts of data, but also working towards this. And technology is not just the micro level, but also at the macro level. So your work with the Urban Think Tank, when most people think about architecture, they think about beautiful design, they think about the buildings. But what I love about what you do is I talk about architects as being health professionals, right? Because the work that they do shapes health much more than healthcare professionals. So I'm going to guess that you agree with that, and ask you to maybe use that to tell us a little bit about your work at Urban Think Tank, and how you are harnessing architecture and the design and technology behind that to build solutions for urban poverty and other social concerns, particularly in the majority world.
Thank you so much. Well, when I went to graduate school at Columbia University, I thought I would become Frank Gehry, one of the iconic architects of the United States, and use all the titanium materials and curvy-wurvy buildings and, all these incredible advanced technologies. But when I got back to my hometown, which was Venezuela, some of you might know about it today, I found a city where 60% of the population is poor and living in slums. So I went to those mayors using data precisely of violence, water, sewage, etc. And I said, you were elected, and you need to do something about these slums. We call them barrios. Some people call them favelas, or you can call them shacks. So I said, well, maybe I need to rethink what I was taught at Columbia University, and rethink the kind of technologies I'm going to employ, and figure out how we can bring and leapfrog them into the 21st century. So the first thing we saw, that sports fields were missing in the favelas. And so highly dense, neighborhoods with 100,000 people, and we even have the largest favela in the world, which is close to 1 million, called Petare. But when I went to the mayor's office to look on the maps, the city maps, and see how he had Petare with data on the wall, it was a white spot. They were invisible, exactly what you said. They don't exist because they're not, of course they exist when voting comes. They are given bricks, and that's why they have built their homes, right? It's part of the political process. That's when I realized that poverty in cities and favelas are actually frozen politics, and have been used for political means. And so, waiting in dignity for services, homes, sports fields, I invented the first patented open source vertical gymnasium, which is stacking sports fields in the air. And that's been repeated by the 5 mayors of Caracas. So that was my first commitment.
I think that deserves a round of applause.
Then I realized those were bringing the sports to the favela. Then I realized that, well, these are hillsides. Maybe you've seen them in La Paz or in Brazil, Rocinha or Caracas. I started to travel around South America. And I realized, wow, people have to walk up, 2 to 3 hours to get to their homes on the hill. They can walk faster down, but what if you're pregnant? What if you're an old person? You know, down these little steps, and when it rains, what happens? So then I said, I had the privilege in my youth to learn how to ski, and I saw the idea of an urban cable car. So I went to Austria, to Doppelmayr, along with my partners, and we asked Doppelmayr to sponsor us for research to put cable cars in favelas. They thought we were crazy. They thought that they would shoot at the cable cars, etc. But we worked with them. They did sponsor us, and we invented their urban ropeway division that has done more than 40 cable cars around the world. Now, urban cable cars, which you might know, Medellin is one of the most famous, but our cable car in Caracas is the first that does a loop, a 5-station loop.
Great.
Yeah. So those are, but lastly, we're now tackling in South Africa, turning shacks into permanent homes. And this is my commitment this year, is to do 1,000 conversions of shacks into homes with 0 displacement at almost no cost.
Fantastic. And how, can you talk a little bit about it, because I think bringing into the partnerships thing before the final round, how is that innovation being implemented? Because obviously there's a tension there with you know, informality and the policy, and sometimes it's, you know, behind, as you mentioned, you know, with the air quality. So land tenure is a really important issue. So how are you, you know, the tech is one aspect, but how are you, you know, how are you engaging with that?
So I went to South Africa to give a lecture. And when I flew into the Cape Town, I saw the Cape Flats. There's 1 million people in shacks all around Cape Town, which is a beautiful city. It doubles for Hollywood, you know, for California and movies and sitcoms. And so I said, I want to go see that. And I found that they were off the map. Of course, these informal settlements have no tenureship, no water, five toilet, you know, pots for 350 people, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, wow. With the apartheid and the history of South Africa, the division, you know, it was a political decision to put them between train tracks and infrastructures, almost impossible to integrate them to the city. I said, no, this is something we got to try to do. So I found a community leader called Pumezo Msibanto, and he was incredible. He said, you come and you do it in this community. And that's where we began. That's where we've done the pilot, the first pilot, and we've completed 77 homes with 5 shops, community center, rooftop aquaponic gardens, food farms, and play space in the smack in the middle. And so what it is I realized that if I give them a double-story unit, they could start shops on the ground floor. Right? It was a lot of resistance. So we mocked up in very anachronistic ways. We mocked up their unit with wooden sticks and fabric. We used an iPad special program that we put together, vectorizing Google Maps, and showed them we could take their houses out, put new houses and new arrangements, and people could then sign off what's their income levels, et cetera, to conclude. And then we would have an agreement signed by the whole community and led by the community.
Right. And what I love about what you've said, and what actually the 3 of you said, is the power of either entrepreneurs working closely with communities to actually shift policies, to shift regulation, right? I lived and worked in Cape Town for over a decade, and one of the things I realized is that, you know, these things are challenging, but they're actually champions within communities, champions within governments that you can work with that can actually push the boundaries on that. So coming back to that final round of thinking about partnerships, tell us what you think are the critical ingredients.
Well, so, you know, I was just actually reflecting on my CGI commitment in 2016, where we announced a partnership with Google. So Mayor Khan was talking about the measurements that happened in London. The methodologies that were used were developed by my company and Google. And we deployed this hyperlocal measurement methodology. And I think, and we've had a 10-year plus partnership with Google. And then we have a lot of partnerships with governments and with community groups. And I think any time that humans come together to solve problems, it has to be rooted in love. Love for our society, love for our fellow humans, and you can suddenly like work across these artificial boundaries of business and government and NGO. All of those things dissolve when you're working from the same place. So I would start with that. But the other two ingredients I think are vulnerability in that context and curiosity. So really openness to learning. I think those are the three.
Thank you.
Yeah, a wonderful question. I think, just reflecting on some of the most successful partnerships that we have established with, for example, the Laredo, Texas border town with Mexico, using wastewater data to better address just overdoses happening in their town, to communities all the way in California and elsewhere in the country. I think, first of all, it's about acknowledging that the status quo doesn't work, and that just because so far maybe we have never had this type of data, that's okay. Like the rejection of the status quo and wanting to innovate and do things differently, I think that's one. Second, I think it's just trust. So starting with like the people and citizens and going across sectors, trust to be able to work across private and government and academia and the citizens. I think that's pretty important. And pretty tied to trust is communication and transparency. So not being afraid of kind of putting it out there, how you're changing things, how you're innovating. At the very beginning of the company, there was a lot of concern and tension about the public reaction to testing wastewater for drugs and like for infectious diseases, and is this going to be seen as an invasion of privacy? And actually, like the complete opposite has happened. Like the CDC polled, and about 95% of adults in the US support wastewater monitoring, and like over 80% say that they adjust their behavior based on wastewater data results. And I think like that is a dream. I think that's the North Star, to just keep that communication all the way to our final like users, which are basically our citizens.
Great, thank you. And finally?
Well, I think you guys have defined it well. Trust is definitely at the key. But I think the partnerships, of course, we need as many partners at all levels, from the community up to the government. And those are very difficult to secure. And the one thing I can say, and I figured out, is that we're very good at visualizing things. So I use art to create that trust. And through art, through visualization, I can bring together those partnerships around ideas when they're visualized. So that's the power I have, is in the image.
Thank you so much. Just to close off this this panel, I would say thank you very much for sharing with us what you're doing and the medicine that you're providing the city for tomorrow's city. So thank you very much. So just closing us off, there are 5 things that struck me from the wonderful panelists that really jump out here as being really critical when thinking about nature and thinking about technology. First, partnerships, which we've talked on there. Second, participation. I think you probably heard across all of those different speakers the importance of participation, be that with communities, be that with decision makers. The third is data, right? That could be data from sensors, that could be data from waste, that could be data from lived experiences and citizen scientists. So really thinking broadly about how we think about data when we're thinking about nature and technology. The fourth is the lived experience. I think wasn't it wonderful to hear from each of the speakers really how they came to their solutions and where they are now, and really the power of harnessing that. And the fifth, and perhaps I think most important for me, is equity, right? None of this works if we don't center what we do on equity. And the reason I'm thinking about that is this this last week we had adopted the first ever declaration on future generations with concrete steps to start thinking about taking into account future generations in our decision makers, in our decision making. I think nowhere is this more important and more urgent than in cities, where the majority and a growing majority of people live. So I'd like to invite you all just to take a moment and reflect on what your 3 words would be in terms of what motivates you and what shapes your vision of cities tomorrow. What 3 words would you think about when you think about what is critical in building the partnerships to harness nature and harness technology to do that? And I'd like to imagine for a moment a tomorrow where we have cities that protect human and planetary health, and reflect on the ways that your work can contribute us to moving us closer to healthier, more hopeful urban futures. And so with that, I would like to draw the session to the end, and thank you for attending to bear witness to these great strides that are happening, and really to thank our speakers for sharing what they are doing to move us closer to what is hopefully our shared, desired, and healthier futures. So thank you all very much.
Head to the Impact Lounge for afternoon refreshments before our final round of breakout sessions starting at 3:15 p.m.
If you